Buonasera a tutti and good evening everybody. La sessione sarà in inglese, perciò avete tutti le cuffiette. Alla fine ci sarà una possibilità di fare domande a Mohamedou. Se le fate in italiano poi posso tradurre io in inglese per lui. So welcome everyone to this session, and I think if I can ask, there we go, you can see Mohamedou Slahi, if we can just give him a round of applause. So let me just give you a brief few words about Mohamedou and Larry as well. This is the book that Mohamedou wrote while he was in Guantanamo Bay, and then Larry Siems, who's with me now, edited the book without ever having met its author, and he has now. So Mohamedou, first of all, thanks so much for being with us. I don't know whether you can see the room. Can you see the room? Can you see us?
Yes, indeed. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. Well, actually, the real pleasure would have been to have you with us in person, which is what was meant to happen and what we thought was going to happen up until a few weeks ago. Just explain to us why we're talking to you via Skype and why you weren't actually able to join us here in Perugia.
I came to get my passport because the government in Mauritania told me that the US counterpart not to allow me to go anywhere. And yeah, that's the reason.
Okay, because part of your release deal with the United States, they've sent you back to your home, to Mauritania. Of course, a lot of ex-Gitmo prisoners don't actually get to go home. You are now in your home country, but you can't travel, you don't have a passport yet. So, Mohamedou, I mean, obviously your book is amazing, and you go into a lot of detail in the book about how you got to Guantanamo and how it all happened and how you were renditioned from Mauritania. Just very briefly, if you can, for the people in the room, just explain to us how it is that you got tangled up into this, because you had links to Al-Qaeda back in the 90s. Just explain all of that to us, and basically why the United States thought you still had links to the group.
Yeah, indeed. As a young teenage boy, I was very, I was following the news, I was following the events in the Middle East, and back then, Afghanistan was very big. It was very sexy to go to Afghanistan and fight the. Most people I know watched Rambo, and yeah. So I went to Afghanistan and twice. Spent a couple of months, and then came back. But that was no big deal. So the big deal was that a person who was related to me, he was from the same time as I was very close to Osama bin Laden. And then one time, he just called me from his phone number. That is the satellite phone of bin Laden. Then I was tagged. Not know that. And so the American watched in the conversation, contacted the Germans where I came. And then I was being monitored for a big time with knowing that. Then the Germans came to the conclusion that it was useless in this of extremism and I moved to Canada in 2000, late 99, 2000, and there was someone who tried to sneak US some very heinous crime, and they skinned. See, they died. Me again. I was the one who was supporting him. Yes, those were the two very important things that made the United States of America suspected me of having links with these extremist groups. Uh, yeah, so for the United States of America, there was nothing that they could press me using the tools of the law. So, lured me into a place where there is no law, and then they took me and they kidnapped me.
And Mohammed, you were renditioned, so you were taken from Mauritania in November 2001. Then I believe you actually ended up in Guantanamo itself, August 2002, and you were actually released just a few months ago, October 2017. So we're talking about 15 years, more or less, that you were actually in Guantanamo, certainly not a free man. I mean, I know it's a big question, and we will discuss the things that happened to you in Guantanamo, but how do you feel now, after such a long time in captivity, and now at least you're home? How do you feel?
For starters, I feel much better than 6 months ago. Yeah, it's really it's a very good feeling. It's freedom. It's way much better than I thought it would be. Even though I thought freedom was a great thing, but I don't think that anyone among us could appreciate freedom more than those who were deprived of it for so long. The fact that you cannot use the bathroom without someone watching you in the bathroom, that you cannot eat without someone giving you food, that you cannot go outside the cell without someone allowing you to do so, that you cannot contact anyone outside this cell if the people wouldn't allow you, and they have never allowed me to do so, and so on and so forth. The smallest of details, my life was controlled. And when I came back, I had to be redomesticated one more time because I didn't understand how to deal with people. For instance, I didn't close the bathroom behind me. And then people said, hey, why don't you close the door? I said, that's my bathroom. I could do whatever the hell I want to do. And this attitude, this compulsion I have with in total control could sometimes cause me trouble.
And Mohamedou, in your time in Guantanamo, it has to be said that your book actually covers up to 2005. And I know that there's a new edition that's coming out where you will write in the introduction, you know, the other 10 years of your time as a prisoner. But even up until 2005, obviously you were tortured when you were there. Things like isolation, you were forced to drink salt water, sleep deprivation, you were put in a cold room, you were effectively like a fake kidnapping was staged, you were beaten, there was sexual molestation, psychological pressure, you know, threats made against your mother even though they weren't actually true. I mean, I know that this may sound like a ridiculously simple question, but how did all of that affect you? How did you live those times? How did you get through them?
If I knew what would have been my life hadn't those things happened to me, I would have answered your question. Like, I could put this question around and said, if you hadn't worked for Al Jazeera, for instance, what would have been your life? I think this is oversimplifying these things. But I would say this is very bad to say. But this pain that I went through really helped me a lot to be a better person, to be able to sympathize with other people. to understand, to defeat hate, to defeat resentment. Because when this pain was inflicted upon me, I was revenge first. I was full of anger, I was full of resentment, and I was full of hate. I wanted to get back at those people. But when I reached the summit of that, so after the summit, you cannot go any further. So, and then I had to go back, meditate, pray, and think. And then I found the solution. The solution is to leave, to drop every resentment, every hate, every judgment, and forgive everyone in the bottom of my heart. And that was really liberating. The feel of it, the feeling of it, and without expecting recognition. I don't need any recognition. I do it for myself, completely for myself.
Well, I have to say, Mohamedou, I mean, in your book, there's two things I think that shine through, apart from what, obviously, the stories that you tell. One is your humanity in it, you know, because we're used to hearing about these things, especially in the West, but you put a real human voice and a human face and human feelings to it. And then also a lot of the grace, I guess is the word I would use, that comes through in the pages of how you've handled the whole thing. But obviously this book is based on the diaries that you were writing and then sending out. What made you decide to write?
Ever since I was a child, I had this compulsion. I write stuff. And then if you had a chance and you look at my old papers like math and so, because I chose to be scientist. So you see in my math notebooks a lot of writing on the margins. Those writings are very intimate. They say stuff that I do. Then sometimes people read them and I get very ashamed because they have that I don't to share with anyone. And it was embarrassing sometimes. So, and in prison, the same thing, but I didn't have any pen. I didn't have anything. I was allowed to have anything. Zilch, nada, zero. So what I did, I used to write with my hands on my clothes, with my finger. And then I drove this guy by the name of Sergeant Charlie. I drove him crazy. He said, "What are you doing?" He thought I was bewitching him. I said, because I didn't know what the answer was, because I wasn't aware I was doing this writing. And then he said, "Either you tell me what you write, or I will punish you." I didn't say anything. And then they took special chains, and then they took my hands away. I couldn't, but I just kept writing anyway. So, and then when they allow other detainees to write letters, I still wasn't allowed to do so. But I used to steal the small pen from the other detainees and write stuff and hide it. Also steal papers. And then one day they came to my cell, they confiscated everything. Everything. They took it away. I wrote it in Arabic. It was a lot of different stuff. And then I waited until late 2005. That's when I met lawyers. And I saw in my lawyers a way out, a window. Then I started writing them like crazy. That's the story.
Well, at this point, Mohamedou, let's bring in Larry, who, of course, turned your pages and your thoughts into an actual book, and he did it without being able to consult you, because I know you guys only met in Mauritania, a few months ago now. So Larry Siems, I mean, this obviously, your work too, as the incredible task of editing it. Just explain to us how difficult it was to get these manuscripts handwritten and to turn them into a book.
Well, so as Mohamedou said, he wrote the manuscript in 2005. He wrote it over several months, and he did that he wrote it in the form of letters to his attorneys when the attorneys were finally allowed to meet prisoners in 2005. when he wrote them in the form of letters to his attorneys, it meant that they were protected material that the US government couldn't destroy. But every single thing that a Guantanamo prisoner writes, says, is classified. From the minute it's created, you can only access it if you have a security clearance. So all of these materials that prisoners give to their attorneys are packed up and taken to a warehouse outside of Washington, D.C., which is what they call a secure facility, and that's where it lives. So Mohamedou's manuscript kind of grew over the course of several months in this place to what it was, ended up being 466 pages, handwritten in English, Mohamedou's fourth language, and it sat there from September of 2005 until about May of 2012. In May of 2012, his attorneys finally succeeded in what had been a years-long battle to get the US government to declassify that information. They'd been fighting in secret court sessions for 7 years to get the government to agree to allow this document to be public. The reason they won in 2012 was because by 2012, the US government had declassified many of its own documents that very vividly told the story that Mohamedou tells in his book. So 2012, I got a phone call from his attorney saying, we have the declassified version of Mohamedou's manuscript, would you like to read it? And I said, yes, of course, mostly because I already knew the incredible story, the horrible story of what had happened to him in Guantanamo from all of these other government documents. So I went home in 2012, I got the manuscript on a CD-ROM, I put it into my computer, I printed out 466 handwritten pages full of, as in the book, full of censorship, 2,500 censorship markings from the US government, and I started reading this incredible document, which was not only this absolutely shattering story of lawlessness on the part of the United States, but this incredible story of resilience and humanity that Mohamedou, I think, alone could have told.
Yeah, and I just want to show you again, like the kind of redactions that there have been, and there's entire pages that are just gone. I mean, look at this. This is what, 10 pages or so, just fully redacted. Do you know, Mohamedou, do you know, or Larry, what was this bit? Where obviously they didn't want anyone to know pages.
Can you see with the book?
Can you see?
Yes,
Mohamedou?
I can.
So what is this passage that's blacked out?
Can you tell me the page?
It's about 306 from 300 to 307. Okay, you're actually gonna go. That's all right. It's the end of chapter 6. Well, you're laughing, so. So what was it that you said there, Mohamedou, that had to be completely redacted?
This is a polygraph test.
Okay.
The details of which I don't want to show.
The
So
polygraph
I
test.
took several polygraphs. And so, Barbara, the good news, Larry and I are working on repairing this damage. And I owe it to my readers to give them everything. So this particular example is a polygraph test. So I went through several, and I passed all of them. And then the government, for some reason, did not want to show that.
Yeah.
They didn't want to show it because the polygraph exam exonerated him. We actually have the government's report of the polygraph exam, which they have the results of the examiner saying that the results show no deception, that he was telling the truth, This is, Mohamedou tells the story of this exam that was, several pages in his manuscript, and the US government simply did not want readers to know.
But Larry, just explain to us, because obviously if the US government, and I'm guessing the US government didn't want any of it to be published, so why is it that this book exists at all?
Mohamedou has a much better answer to this question than I do, actually.
I guess why was
well,
it allowed
I'm going to give you Mohamedou's answer and then tell you why it's better. Mohamedou recently in an interview in the United States said, the fact that the book is out and published shows the greatness of the United States. It was an astonishing statement, but that there's enough rule of law in the United States that they could not absolutely burn this book, right? There was some system in place that kept the book, and then ultimately it sort of came to the surface. I don't know, Mohamedou, do you still agree with that? Is that still your...
Absolutely. And yes, of course, the US government is very strong when it comes to non-US citizens. There are two types of human beings, US citizens and everybody else. So I have to be from the second category, everybody else, but also everybody else is also are categories. So if you are white European, for instance, you are better off. So I have committed the heinous crime of having been born in Africa. So the thing is this. So Barbara, this book was finished in September of 2005 and was published in January of 2015, I think. So for the US government, this is a very good win because the news is really, this book was a piece of news. And the United States government succeeded by fight tooth and nail of not having this book published for so many years. And they thought this is useless now. So let them publish, let them enjoy it.
And Mohamedou, how did you feel, though? I mean, obviously, when you came out of Guantanamo, you had a lot of emotions for a lot of different reasons. But how did you feel the first time that you actually saw the book, the first time that you could hold it, the first time that you could read it in its published form? How did that feel?
I remember vividly the set where I was. So I was taking Spanish lessons. And the reason why I took them, because I saw this ex-Venezuelan president, Hugo Chavez. He was speaking passionately. And he kept saying La burguesia, La burguesia. I didn't understand what La burguesia meant. So I know what La bourgeoisie means, but La burguesia I didn't understand. And then I decided to learn Spanish just to understand what he was saying. And then I talked to some Puerto Rican guards, and then they helped. Puerto Rican guard by the name of Alex, and he helped. And then I was able to understand the Spanish enough news and so. So and then in Guantanamo Bay, they have teachers. They give like basic stuff, like basic math, life skills, and then they also, for some reason, they teach also Spanish. Don't ask why. So, and I want to be a good detainee. So I said, I want to learn Spanish. But it was like, after I've already taught Spanish, they say, okay, we have a guy, he's Egyptian guy, okay? And he spoke English, so I could accept it. But Spanish was just something he attended a couple of sessions in the US, and then he said, I could teach Spanish. And then he came to me and said, okay, I teach you Spanish. I said, okay. I just want to sit with him. I didn't want him to teach me anything. And then we turned the TV on. Voila. It was me. It was a piece about me and the book.
Yeah.
Then I felt like I wasn't anymore in prison because now my voice is out there. The narrative, my side of the story is out there. So, because there was only one side of the story, the government side of the story. And I'm not judging the government. I'm not saying my side of the story is the absolute truth. Absolutely not. I'm just saying there are two competing narratives, and mine is one of them. That's it. That's all I wanted.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's your book out there, of course, and now, you can, maybe not be with us physically, but now, you can also put your story forward as well. But the timing is quite interesting. You were released in October of 2016, literally a month before the election of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has made no secret of how he feels about Guantanamo Bay, about how he feels about torture, even though his Defense Secretary James Mattis has told them that he doesn't think it works. What would you tell, I guess, Donald Trump or Trump's America about what you've learned at Guantanamo? I mean, when you hear the current president of the United States, almost laud Guantanamo Bay when Barack Obama, even though he didn't manage to shut it down, still, that was his intention. I mean, how do you feel? How would you want to use your voice? If you could tell Donald Trump something about Guantanamo, what would you say?
Ever since I heard what he said, the chilling statements that he made about Guantanamo Bay and about torture, I kept having nightmares. Last night, I had these nightmares that I'm back to Guantanamo Bay just to finish some paperwork. They said I will be sent back, but they just want to finish some paperwork. And I found myself, like my heart now is pounding, I found myself in this camp. It's transfer camp. But I know that Trump was in charge. And I woke up sweating and shaking. And so, being practical, let me now be practical, Barbara. So I would tell Donald Trump, take people, the bad dudes, and torture them, because I know he would do the exact opposite of what I'm telling you. So. You see, Barbara, are we going to be with humanity? Are we going to respect the law? Are we going just to do whatever comes to our mind? So we have to choose. We have, this argument, it's very wrong. The discussion, talking point in the US are whether torture works or not. This is very twisted discussion. I would advance this argument. In Africa, some of families in Mauritania, they are very poor because they have too many kids. So if the family says, okay, I killed 5 kids, that will solve immediately the economic problem. But this is horrible to discuss about. This is horrible to say. So, and I really don't know. I take this very personal. It's against the U.S. law to torture people, against international law. We understand now that the rule of law is better than dictatorship. And I really wish we could understand this. 15 years, the United States, they couldn't build a case against me. And Barbara, I put on paper that I admit to heinous crime. They just need to take it to a judge and put me or kill me just kill me or put me in prison. It does not work. Torture does not work. And I made false statements about innocent people. It's waste of money going there and capture those people and find that they're just working in a pizzeria.
Mohamedou, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll open up to the audience to see if anyone here has some questions for you. I mean, as you mentioned, 15 years in Guantanamo. When it comes to accountability, I mean, I know that there's a sort of grace to your book, and you don't really, you know, you're not after revenge, but when it comes to accountability, and, you know, maybe not just towards the United States, but your own government, Mauritania, that rendered you in the first place. I mean, how do you feel about that? Is there a difference between, you know, going after revenge, which obviously you don't want to do, or just holding people accountable for what happened, and, you know, not just to you, but hundreds of people that were kept in Guantanamo?
This is very hard question because I cannot have both ways. I cannot ask I forgive people and then I run after them. So I think someone has to do this dirty job of holding people accountable. And this is, Barbara, it's very sad that if you do a crime to someone who is from a third world country, there is no problem. But if you do a crime to an American person, you are held accountable. You see, Barbara, I'm sitting now here, and I'm of my human rights, my basic human rights. This is a portable Guantanamo Bay in Mauritania. I cannot have my passport because some president in 4,000 miles away said I cannot. And there is no way for me to challenge him. You know why? Because I'm not an American citizen. And this is a good fight. That's why when they want to send me out of Guantanamo Bay, I had two options, Germany and Mauritania. Guess what they was picked? They said, no, we send Mauritania. I was laughing. I said, of course I go to Mauritania. There is no problem. And I showed them a statement that was made by a Department of State urging Mauritania to uphold human rights and to afford people the right venues and means to challenge the government. I said, you are good. I just want to law. And this is a good fight, what I'm doing now. And I'm doing it for everyone. You see, it's censorship. They don't want me to go anywhere because they don't want me to speak about any of this stuff. But I will speak, and I will go everywhere. And I will do it gracefully and peacefully. And there is no one who is to stop me. Absolutely not.
Mohamedou, thank you for that. Now, yeah, I think that deserves a round of applause, actually. Now, are there questions in the audience? If you could put your hand up and maybe stand up. Okay, so there's one there, sorry. Would you mind standing up if you've got a question? Oh, and one up here, yeah, madam? In Italian or English?
Italiano.
Whichever language what language do you want?
Spanish.
Oh, Spanish, I can't do Spanish. Oh, no, but actually, Mohammed. Okay.
Okay. Voleva chiedere, mi dispiace per tutto quello che ti è successo, è molto triste. Voleva chiederti, no, secondo te, su tutta tua esperienza che hai avuto in Guantanamo, confermi che i diritti di tutti gli umani stanno siendo calpestati perché non hanno più rispetto per l'umano? Perché tu, all'aver portato tanti anni lì senza nessuna prova, vuol dire che tu non hai avuto il sostegno del Stato civile per poter affrontare la tua verità. Quindi sono ancora l'umano protetto di questi diritti, che l'America è basata sui diritti, è il primo emendamento della Costituzione dove dice che il diritto dell'uomo è indispensabile per essere libero, perché è stato fondato su due basi l'America, no? Sul diritto civile e sul diritto religioso.
Mohamedou, could you hear that? Could you understand that?
Bits and pieces. If you could repeat again.
Okay, so tell me, so basically it's about
Okay.
the human rights and respecting his human rights.
Sul diritto. Sì. Essendo qualunque paese basato sui diritti umani, no? Pensi che sono ancora attualmente rispettati questi diritti?
Okay, so when countries step on human rights, I mean, do you feel that they are still respected, human rights? Do you feel, I guess, that you were the exception, or do you think that in general human rights are not being respected? I think that's an approximation of the question.
I don't look at the world in black and white. Human rights, we have to ask where and whose human rights. There are a lot to be wanted, to be wished for, want to improve. The example of the United States of America, I understand that the United States of America treats people differently. If you are from certain countries, your human rights are not as sacred as if you are, let's say, a US citizen or a European citizen. European citizens are not like American citizens, so the people are classified different types. And I think that torture, let's agree that torture is a human rights violation. And torture took place. But I'm not going to make a blanket statement about any.
All right, Mohamedou, we've got two other questions. I think there was one over there. If you could please, scusa, quello là, no, c'è un signore là con la mano alzata. Yeah, no, I know, and there's two.
Okay, good afternoon. Yeah, thank you very much for your. Maybe I should walk away from the de la casa. Thank you very much for your availability to speak about your experience. What I felt very intense when reading parts of your book and also a book of another inmate of Guantanamo was that I had the feeling before by other journalists maybe there had not been told any story very much taking into account also the human person behind that got imprisoned. And I was wondering whether you would see any lessons learned also for journalists in terms of like that sometimes certain perspectives are forgotten for a very long time, and then when your book came out, also the book of other inmates that was showing very much this deficit, that for a very long time basically there was not a lot of care for like whether also injustice was done to very concrete living people, and I felt more the discussion was always very abstract about we are not having good practices with regards to our legal system, but the persons didn't really appear for me so strongly.
Could you hear that, Mohamedou? Yeah.
Yes, I could. You see, in America they say, put face on it. If you hear about detainees, terror suspects, you see, in German they say, wenn das Militär sich bewegt, bleibt die Wahrheit der Strecke. Okay, that's very long one, but I say it in English. Truth cannot keep up with the military. So the military chooses the narrative, how to describe the enemy, other, that is me. So, and they show only very ugly pictures of me. They make me very angry, like this, and very unclean. So, and if journalists come in contact with, let's say, US military, very nice people, very good looking, very well trimmed, very nice girl, very cute, and of course they will side them. Of course they will listen to their narrative. They never met, they never ate food we can make. I bet if you eat my food, you will love me. Absolutely, 100%. Hands down.
Mohamedou, Larry, Larry, forgive me for interrupting. Larry just wanted to add something there.
I mean, it's a really excellent question, and this is a great place to make a personal pitch, I think, because Mohamedou's quite right. The narratives, the voices of the prisoners have been systematically suppressed to this day in Guantanamo. Those who have been released, many of them have been released to countries where they have no connections, they don't speak the language, they live very isolated lives. I had a debate with a colleague of mine in the human rights world in about 2005, 2006. They were bringing a series of lawsuits challenging Guantanamo detentions, torture, but they were not focusing on the individual stories of the prisoners. And I said, why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you going and talking to their families? Why aren't you doing that? And they said, well, we don't know if they're bad guys. In a sense, what Mohamedou's saying, even the press, even the human rights world had internalized the narrative that we were dealing with bad dudes. And so the idea was even in the human rights community, we're going to talk about principles, we're going to talk about you don't torture, you don't do due process, but we're going to do generalities and we're not going to speak about individuals and the impact of these actions on human beings. There's nothing more intimate than torture. There's nothing more humanly intimate than torture, than one person in a room with another person who's terrorizing him, right? And not to even allow ourselves to think of that moment and to think of that human exchange, not only to hear the voices of the prisoners, but to hear the voices of the men and women who were forced into that situation, which are also systematically suppressed in the United States. Guards and interrogators from Guantanamo signed non-disclosure agreements. To this day, they can't talk about their duty because it's classified. And there's an enormous degree of post-traumatic stress disorder among guards and interrogators from Guantanamo from the trauma of being in the other side of that equation. So, the message to journalists is those are stories that are still out there, still desperate to be told. And I think, that we won't begin to resolve this story until we hear those stories.
And I guess that's why it's such a powerful book and such a necessary one.
Exactly.
We got time for one last question. The gentleman over there.
Yes, thank you. Mohamedou, I have a very bold question, but please do not misunderstand me. Who do you consider yourself now? Like, who do you feel you are now? A writer, probably, a human rights activist, or else? Please describe. Thank you.
First, I would like to adjust one more previous question. So when people ask me, what does embedded journalist mean? I say embedded journalist means a journalist who is embedded with the government. So, to your question.
We're losing it.
It's very saddening because I didn't choose the biggest portion of my life took place in Guantanamo Bay. I did not choose any of it. So, but today, I would love to write books, and I still love to engage in my technology background. I have to update myself, like data security and application. And of course, I am 100% unapologetically engaged in human rights, because I take it personal. I do not want what happened to me to happen to any human being, no matter who they are, no matter what's wrong. And I'm doing this, and I will do this peacefully and in accordance with the law.
Mohamedou, we're having some problems with the internet line, but it lasted this long, so we were lucky. Thank you so much for having spent this time with us, for having answered the questions. And thank you so much for writing the book. And thank you also to Larry Siems, who edited the book. So Larry, thank you. And Mohamedou, I know that there's a new version of your book coming out, so I hope that one day soon I'll be able to speak to you in person, and you'll be somewhere in Europe doing this live with all of us. For the moment, thank you so much. Thank you. Grazie, grazie mille.
Thank you.